All right. Thank you for joining us on today's podcast. I want to have some fun today by talking about something that we talked about as a young adult ministry just a short time ago, and that's cancel culture. And it was a very, very fruitful topic. And so many people had such a wide range of opinions on it. There were some that were saying, man, this is an important piece of what we do today. It empowers us. And then there were other people that said, hey, you know what? This thing might be a little toxic. And so I did want us to have a discussion about council culture today and also to bring some type of a biblical perspective to it. And I'm hoping that you guys will be up for this kind of thought and a little dialogue. Hopefully, those of you who are listening to this podcast will feel impelled or encouraged to go back to write a response or even record a response. And if you record a response to the podcast, I'll be sure to come back and to uh, give a response to what you have submitted to the actual dialogue about this podcast. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Johnny Ogletree III. For those of you who do not know, you can find me on any social media by typing in the hashtag PastorJDO3. I am a elder at First Metropolitan Church, and also I'm a young adult pastor at First Met, and I'm the successor to the ministry there. And one of my passions is, of course, the Lord, and also getting to know young people and hearing thoughts and trying to find some kind of a bridge between the cultures, and so we can understand each other and we can be a more effective church. And so I'm hoping that these podcasts will do just that. That'll start some dialogue, open some clarity, build some bridges, make some connections, so that we can be a more effective church, and also make sure that when it is time to pass this on to the next generation, that we have an even smoother transition and a church that is on an incline and not a decline. All right. So look, cancel culture. So I'm gonna pull some excerpts out of a blog, and I'm gonna give you some dialogue from that, and then I'm hoping that you will be thinking, and then at the end of this podcast, that you will feel compelled to make a response to the actual dialogue itself. So look, uh, the way I approached this was I looked at Matthew the seventh chapter verses 1 through 2, as not to give it away. I know some of you are Bible scholars and probably know what that scripture is already. I'll jump into the dialogue and then I'll read the scripture so that I can show you the way that I try to approach this actual topic with the young adults at our church. Look, cancel culture has emerged as a way of dealing with those that have offended a person, a group, or is deemed dangerous to the community. Now, I guess that first of all, some of you might want to know what cancel culture is. So let me stop here. Cancel culture is something that has emerged through this generation. And so what happens is if someone says something maybe politically incorrect, that is deemed incorrect, or if they make a choice or a decision or a statement or do some type of an action that people find that is disagreeable or harmful to society, or a norm that is not appreciated or supported by society, then the larger group of people that are watching, generally it happens through social media, will decide to boycott this person. And by boycotting this person, literally cancel this person out. So you can imagine if you were a social media star. And like I'm starting this podcast. So I'm on this podcast and I'm saying something, and then I make a statement out of a 15-minute podcast that is offensive to someone. And then that person takes that one statement and takes a snippet of the podcast, puts it out there and says, this guy is offensive. He said this. I don't know, whatever. I'm a person that doesn't like podcasts, and what he did offended me. And because of what he said, I believe that we need to counsel this guy. All right. And so then they spread the word throughout the rest of the social media, throughout all social media. It goes across the internet, and the word across town is cancel this guy. If you've subscribed to him before, unsubscribe. If you bought any of his product, don't buy any of his product. If you've shared any of his videos, don't share any of his videos. Let's literally snuff this guy out. And honestly, it's been pretty effective for the most part, even though there have some people who have been uncanceled after being canceled because they have found out more about that person's situation and then had to rethink the cancellation. And then some people have just been so resilient and so popular and are so talented that they've been able to avoid cancellation altogether. But the reality is, that the cancel culture has everyone a little bit timid and a little bit frigid about making statements because you realize that everyone is analyzing everything that you say, and anything that you say could simply get you canceled. So look, honestly, when I first heard this term and I saw people doing it and I saw the way it worked, it was around the Black Lives Matter movement. And there were some people that were making some statements. Those Karens that were out there, right? The Karens were out there and they kept doing some things and people would videotape them. And it's like, all right, let's cancel this person out. They put them out there. And at first he was like, oh, okay, I get that. I get that. And then it started to go down into some of the artists that were out there and it stopped being Karens and Bills. And then there were these young artists, some people who had just for the first time had a mic in front of their mouth, not in for rapping purposes or for poetry purposes, but now people want to know their opinion on what's happening in the larger portion of society. And then this young person takes this microphone and they give their 2 cents. And after giving their 2 cents, the larger majority of society says, no. We don't like what they said. So what we're going to do is we're going to cancel this person. And sometimes what the person said was just a lack of maturity. And sometimes it's just out of pure ignorance. Sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes people are simply clueless. Sometimes people are just a product of their environment. And they may not always believe completely what they said, but maybe they just repeated some rhetoric that was passed on to them for someone else who was raised to be ignorant. And now this person's entire career is hinging on a statement that they made that might not even be longer than 30 seconds. Now let me ask you, brothers and sisters, what would your life be like if someone was able to download your life and scroll through every statement that you've made, scroll through every action that you've done, scroll through every encounter that you had, whether it was with a classmate, whether it was with the lady at the grocery store, whether it was driving your car and somebody cut you off, whether it was the bad service that you got at a restaurant when you were paying your top dollar and that person, for whatever reason, didn't feel like they needed to give you the service that you were paying for. What would happen if that was done to you? Now, what I was trying to get the young people to understand is that everybody thinks that canceling someone is fine until it's time for you to get canceled. See, what generally happens with people is people want justice. People want what's right. People don't want mercy. People want the person to pay for their actions, and then they forget, yeah, we're human too. And at some point, you're going to make a mistake. And when you make this mistake, you won't want to hear any counsel talk. You want people to be thinking, let me be merciful towards them. You'll want people to understand you. You'll want people to forgive you. You want people to put down the gavel and not to judge or to condemn you. Especially those of you who have a family. Imagine what your life would be like if everything you had hinged on one or two statements. I dare say, myself included, if everything was hinged on one or two statements, I'd have nothing. 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 You understand what I'm saying? I wouldn't have anything. I don't even know how far I would have gotten or what I could possibly have achieved if everything hinged on one or two statements or choices or actions. So I want to ask you, is council culture fair? Now, the initial intent of council culture was to hold people accountable for their words and their actions. But it has become the demise of many people who responded simply out of ignorance, immaturity, entitlement, misinformation, and an unenlightened state. So, what happens is that the actions from people make it feel like uh, the counseling is justified, because when people say something that's offensive, you feel somehow justified in your response to them. And what I'm saying to you, brothers and sisters, that doesn't always make it right. Jesus says something, and now we'll get to the text in Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 1 through 2. He says, look, do not judge, lest you be judged, for in the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured unto you. Yes, for all of you who love to hop in, for all of you who love to counsel people, for all of you who love to tear apart someone's life, for all of you who love to judge everyone based upon one action and one statement, God says simply this: the same way you judge people, the same way you criticize people, the same way you tear apart people, the same way you don't forgive people, the same way you don't show mercy to people, the same way you turn a deaf ear to people, the same way you take a blanket and throw it over someone and put their fire out, the same way you starve that family and make them suffer for one statement. He says, look, the same measurement that you use towards others will be used towards you. So there it is, brothers and sisters. What do you think about this cancel culture? Has it gone a little too far? Has it overstepped and overreached its bounds? Did it once achieve something that was positive and that contributed to society and brought awareness to something and to certain things? Or is now the cancel culture just a vigilante mob walking around seeking who it can destroy? I don't know, but I would love to hear from you, and I would love to talk to you about your thoughts on cancel culture. Hey, look, I thank you guys for joining me for this time on this podcast, and I'm hoping that it will be something that causes you to think, and I look forward to hearing your response so that we can enter into dialogue together. I'd like to also know how you feel about the usage of the scripture please just join me in dialogue. Let's talk about this scripture because I think that it really does do a good job of making us consider possibly our thoughts and actions towards this thing called council culture. Hey, we'll see you on the next podcast. Remember, you can find me on any social media. My name is Johnny Ogletree III. You can find me simply by typing in the hashtag PastorJD03. That's the title of this podcast. And that's how you can find me on any social media. Follow me. I'll follow you back, and I look forward to speaking to you. God bless you, and we'll see you and hear from you on the next podcast.